let's unpack this. I want you to picture a scenario that I think, well, every single person listening has been in. You get bit by the bug, maybe you decide, I'm going to start a business, or I'm going to run a marathon. Or maybe it's smaller, like I'm finally going to fix my sleep schedule. What is the absolute first thing you do? It's almost a reflex.
Oh, I know this reflex well. You go hunting for the winner. You find the person standing at the top of the mountain, holding the trophy.
Exactly. You buy the biography of the billionaire CEO, you watch the Olympic gold medalist's YouTube channel, you study the guy who beat the stock market 10 years in a row. We obsess over their habits. Did they drink matcha or black coffee? Did they wake up at 4 a.m. or 5 a.m.? We want the blueprint. We want the secret sauce.
It's the most natural human impulse in the world. Copy the survivor. If you want to survive the jungle, you follow the guy who made it out right.
Right. But today, we're taking a sledgehammer to that instinct. The source material we have for this deep dive argues that this obsession with the winner, this survivor worship, is not just slightly misguided. It argues that it's actually dangerous. It suggests that by focusing exclusively on the champions, we are voluntarily throwing away the most critical survival data available to us.
Because we're ignoring the people who lost.
And not just ignoring them, we actively avoid them. It's like we're allergic to them. If someone says, I started a business and it went bankrupt in 6 months, we kind of, awkwardly shuffle away at the party.
And that's the core premise here. We don't avoid asking losers for advice because we think they're stupid. We avoid them because we are terrified of what they do know.
That is such a heavy idea. It implies there's a specific kind of knowledge that only exists in failure.
It does, and the source raises this existential question that really stops you in your tracks. Does the winner actually remember the traps that made other people fall? Or do they only remember the path that kept them standing?
It's the difference between asking someone how they walked through a minefield without getting blown up versus asking the person who actually stepped on a mine.
Precisely. The winner can tell you, I walked left, then right, then straight. But they can't tell you for sure if the path to the left was actually safe or if they just got lucky. They survived, so they assume the path was good. The person who stepped on the mine, they know exactly where the mine is. Our mission today is to figure out why we worship the success story, why those stories are often structurally flawed, bordering on fiction, and how we can build a survival map by finally sitting down and listening to the people who didn't make it.
So let's get into the structure of these stories. The source material uses this fascinating metaphor of the clean narrative versus the scratch. It basically says that winners, even the honest ones, are unreliable narrators.
Yes, and this isn't about lying. It's about how the human brain processes memory. Think about any biography you've read of a famous, successful figure, or even when you listen to a founder on a podcast. The story is always round. It's smooth, it's polished, it follows a logical chain of cause and effect. I had this vision, so I took this risk, which led to this struggle, which unlocked this breakthrough. It makes sense, it feels inevitable. But the source argues that real life, while it is actually happening, is never round. It's jagged, it's chaotic.
It's panic, confusion, and randomness. It's waking up at 3 a.m. wondering if you made a huge mistake.
Exactly. But the human brain hates chaos. So after you win, your memory acts like a filter. Over time, it sands down the edges. It filters out the sheer luck, the panic, the near misses, and it creates a narrative that implies control. They convince themselves and us that the outcome was the result of a coherent plan.
Whereas the loser, they don't get the luxury of that filter.
Well, they don't. The person who failed, their memory retains the scars, the scratches. They remember the raw, unrationalized evidence of exactly what killed the journey. They don't have a success story to smooth over the cracks. They just have the cracks.
This explains a specific frustration I think a lot of our listeners have felt. I know I have. You read the book, you follow the 7 habits, you wake up at 4 a.m., you journal, you hustle, and you still fall flat on your face. And you sit there thinking, what is wrong with me? I followed the instructions.
And that is the most damaging part of the winner's history. The insight from our sources today is, nothing is necessarily wrong with you. You didn't fail because you were less capable. You failed because the specific mechanisms that defeat us, the hidden traps, the bad timing, the structural walls, are rarely mentioned in the victory speech.
Because the victor didn't hit them. Or maybe they hit them and didn't realize how close they came to dying.
Or they had a safety net they forgot to mention. As the source puts it beautifully, success often hides the cause. Failure reveals the structure.
Failure reveals the structure. Wow. That is going to be the quote of the episode for me. But if failure is so data-rich, if it's this gold mine of structural information, why are we so culturally allergic to it? I mean, why don't we have a failure section in the bookstore right next to business?
Well, this is where we have to get into the psychology of the learner. The source suggests that we don't just consume information to learn, we consume information to be comforted. We have a deep primate-level need for reassurance.
So reading a success story is like a security blanket.
It validates a worldview we want to believe in. Winners prove that effort equals reward. They prove that suffering has meaning. When you read about an athlete training for 4 years and then winning gold, it tells you that the universe is fair. It tells you that there is a linear relationship between how hard you work and what you get.
It tells me, hey, all those late nights you're pulling, don't worry, there's a pot of gold at the end.
Exactly. It's a transaction. Input equals output. But the loser brings a message that is fundamentally terrifying to the human ego. Sometimes input does not equal output. Sometimes you do everything right. You work hard, you're smart, you're honest, and you still lose.
That's an existential threat to our motivation. If I believe that, why would I even get out of bed?
That is exactly why we avoid them. We protect our motivation by blocking out the data that suggests the universe is random. It reminds me of the classic concept of survivorship bias. We hear this term thrown around a lot, but the source really drills down into what it means for our decision-making.
Yeah, let's clarify that. I feel like people use survivorship bias to just mean luck, but it's more specific, isn't it?
It is. The classic example, and the best one, is from World War II. The military was looking at the bombers coming back from battle. They analyzed the damage and saw bullet holes all over the wings and the tail. So the engineers said, okay, the data shows we're getting hit in the wings and tail. We need to put more armor there.
Which sounds logical. That's where the holes are. That's where the data is.
It sounds perfectly logical, but it's dead wrong. A statistician named Abraham Wald pointed out the flaw. He said, no, you need to put the armor where the holes aren't. Because the planes that got hit in the engines or the cockpit, they didn't come back, they crashed. The bullet holes in the wings represented the damage you could survive.
So by studying the winners, the planes that returned, we are looking at the damage that doesn't matter. We are studying non-fatal errors.
Exactly. We are looking at survivable traits. When we interview a billionaire who says, I took massive risks, we are looking at a plane with holes in the wings. We aren't seeing the thousands of other entrepreneurs who took the exact same massive risks, who took the bullets in the engine and went bankrupt. We don't see the dead paths.
And there's also a fantasy element here, isn't there? The source mentions identification.
Yes. This is the escapism aspect. We listen to winners because we want to fantasize about becoming them. When you listen to a tech mogul talk about their yacht or their freedom, mentally you are on the yacht. You're trying on their life like a costume. It feels good.
But listening to a loser, that's not exactly a fantasy I want to have.
No. Listening to a loser forces you back into your own reality. It forces you to look at your bank account, your limitations, your mortgage. It's a buzzkill. It breaks the spell.
It also carries a lot of shame. The source talks about collective shame.
This is the societal enforcement mechanism. We treat failure not just as an event, something that happened, but as a label. You are a failure. Because of this stigma, the people who have the most valuable maps, the maps of where the cliffs and the quicksand are, they stay silent, they hide.
Because nobody wants to stand on a stage and say, here's how I lost everything.
Exactly. So that communal knowledge evaporates. We are throwing away the most dangerous maps of life because we are too polite or too proud to look at them.
And because we're too proud to look at the map, we keep walking off the same cliffs.
Over and over again.
I want to pivot to something the source calls the hidden mechanisms of success stories. It argues that winners, even the ones trying to be helpful, unintentionally rewrite history. They engage in something called post hoc rationalization.
Yeah, it's a fancy term, but it describes something we all do. It's connecting the dots backward. When you look back at a success, random events start to look like vision. Pure luck gets rebranded as calculated risk-taking.
Oh, I see this constantly in the tech world. A company pivots because they're about to run out of cash, they're desperate, they throw a Hail Mary, and they stumble onto a hit product. 5 years later, the CEO is on the cover of a magazine saying, "We always knew the market was shifting this way."
Right, and they probably believe it. They aren't lying. Their brain has reorganized the memory to make them the protagonist who drove the action. The loser, they can't connect the dots into a pretty picture because their story is broken. Therefore, their story is actually more honest. They can tell you, I made this decision on Tuesday, and by Friday, it had destroyed the company. There's no way to spin that into vision.
There's a specific point the source makes about rebranding luck and risk that I found really provocative. It basically says the result changes the name of the action.
This is crucial for anyone involved in finance or business. The source argues that we judge actions entirely by the result, not by the quality of the decision. If you win, reckless behavior is called courage. But if you lose, that exact same behavior is called foolishness.
It's the crypto brother phenomenon. We praise the guy who bet his life savings on a meme coin because it went up. He's a visionary.
Yeah.
But we mock the guy who did the exact same thing but bought the coin that went down.
Same action, same risk profile, same lack of due diligence, different label. And the source argues we learn the absolute wrong lesson here. We start thinking that betting everything is a strategy for success rather than a strategy for variance. We confuse the outcome with the process.
And we also ignore the cost. The source talks about the invisible costs of winning.
Winners talk about the trophy. They show you the medal. They rarely talk about the chronic back pain, the broken marriages, the anxiety disorders, or the 5 years of life expectancy they lost due to stress.
We see the podium, not the divorce papers.
Exactly. But the loser feels the full weight of those costs without the anesthetic of the reward. The source makes a profound point here. Failure isn't just missing the goal. It's bearing the full cost of the journey without the prize. So if you want to know the real price of an ambition, what it actually costs your soul and your body, don't ask the person who got the check at the end. Ask the person who paid the bill and got nothing.
That's a sobering thought. It also touches on this idea that sometimes the only difference between the winner and the loser isn't skill, it's just resources.
Or pain tolerance. The source suggests many winners weren't necessarily smarter or better at their craft, they just had a longer financial runway. They could endure instability for 3 years, whereas the loser had to quit after 6 months because they had to pay rent.
Which reframes the whole thing. One is a scheduling conflict with poverty, the other is hailed as grit.
Precisely.
So let's bring this back to the listener, the learner. If we keep consuming this success porn, as the source implies, what is it actually doing to our brains? What's the downside of just trying to be positive?
It leads to what the source calls internalizing failure. When you only see success narratives and you struggle, you conclude, I am bad. You ignore structural factors, timing, market saturation, sickness, family obligations, and you take 100% of the blame.
The source gives the example of the entrepreneur versus the market.
Yes. The winner says, just persist, never give up. The loser knows they failed, not because of a lack of will, but because the market was saturated. If you listen to the winner, you think you just didn't want it enough. If you listen to the loser, you realize you faced a math problem.
That distinction, moral failing versus math problem, is huge. If I think it's a moral failing, I just beat myself up. I spiral. If I know it's a math problem, maybe I can solve it next time.
Yeah.
Or maybe I realize the equation is unsolvable.
Or maybe you realize you shouldn't play that specific game at all. But paradoxically, worshiping success creates a fear of action. We become paralyzed because we think every stumble is a verdict on our worth. We are terrified to look like the loser, so we don't move. We don't take the shot.
Which is ironic. By worshiping success, we become less likely to achieve it because we're too scared to look bad.
Correct.
Let's zoom out to the societal level for a second. Why doesn't society teach us this? Why isn't there a failure 101 class in high school? Why do we have to dig for this info?
Because of the economy of hope. Hope is a fuel. It's a product. The entire economic engine runs on the belief that you could be next. Real, unvarnished failure destroys hope.
If you tell people the truth, that sometimes you work hard, do everything right, and still get crushed, productivity might drop. People might not buy the online course.
The system suppresses the narrative of failure to keep the engine running. It's like we're being trained to step on the gas pedal, but nobody taught us where the brakes are.
Or where the guardrails are.
The source argues schools and media teach us optimization, how to be faster, better, stronger. But they don't teach survival, how to not die. We are accelerating without knowing the terrain.
And when someone tries to explain why they failed, we dismiss them. We say, oh, stop making excuses, don't be bitter.
That dismissal is a defense mechanism. We label the explanation as bitterness so we don't have to face the structural reality that the person is pointing out. We silence the canary in the coal mine because its singing is depressing.
Okay, I'm sold. I want the data. I want to talk to a loser. I want to find someone who failed at what I want to do. But, well, that's awkward. You can't just walk up to someone and say, hey, I heard you tanked your business. Tell me why you suck.
No, please do not do that. You will not get good data and you will lose a friend. The source offers a very specific strategy here on how to extract this wisdom. First rule, do not ask, what did you learn?
Really? That sounds like a perfectly good, open-ended question. What did you learn from the experience?
It sounds nice, but it's too cliche. It feels like a job interview. It invites a prepared, philosophical answer. It invites them to try and spin it to sound like they've grown. You don't want the spin, you want the raw data. So you need to shift the question. Ask, at what moment did you not realize you were losing?
Ooh, at what moment did you not realize you were losing? That's sharp.
It forces them to go back to the state of mind before the crash. You are hunting for the blind spot. You want to know about the specific signal they ignored? Was it an email they didn't send? Was it a cost overrun they thought was temporary? Was it a gut feeling they suppressed because they didn't want to look weak?
You're looking for the trap.
Exactly. The source also mentions asking about the just a little longer trap.
What's that?
It's the rationalization phase. Ask them about the logic they use to stay on a sinking ship. Things like, it's just a phase, or I need to be strong for the team, or if we just get to the next quarter. We need to distinguish between perseverance, which we praise, and refusal to recognize a dead end.
That is a razor-thin line, the difference between bravery and digging your own grave.
And the loser can tell you exactly what digging that grave felt like from the inside. They can tell you the texture of the denial.
And finally, there's the concept of dignified retreat.
Yes, we need to destigmatize quitting. The source argues that knowing when to quit is a high-level skill, not a weakness. It is about saving what is left of your resources, your money, your sanity, your reputation, so you can fight another day. Listening to losers teaches you how to retreat before you are totally destroyed.
That is such a healthier way to look at it. Quitting isn't losing. Sometimes quitting is saving the rest of your life.
It's risk management.
So we've covered a lot. We've talked about the winner's filtered history, the psychological comfort of success stories, the hidden mechanics of failure, and how to actually extract this data.
Yeah.
As we wrap this up, I want to make sure we land this plane correctly. What is the big takeaway? Are we just trying to be pessimists?
Not at all. The goal isn't pessimism. The source calls it existential clarity.
Existential clarity. I like that. Unpack it.
Think of it this way. We aren't looking for a map to the summit. Why? Because the summit changes constantly. The market changes, technology changes, consumer tastes change. A map to the summit from 2015 is useless today, but we are looking for a death map.
A death map.
A map of the landmines. The landmines, the structural traps, the psychological delusions, the financial black holes. Those stay the same. They rarely change. Human nature doesn't change. If you have the death map, you can navigate any terrain.
That is a powerful image. We're so busy looking for the treasure map, X marks the spot, that we forget to grab the map that shows where the quicksand is.
And that is the true promised land the source speaks of. It's not a place where you are guaranteed to win. There is no such place. It's a place where you stop being blind to how you could lose.
It forces you to rethink who you listen to. It forces you to value the scar over the trophy.
It really does.
I want to leave our listener with this final thought from the source material because it really shook me. It's a challenge, really.
Go for it.
The challenge is this. If you stopped asking champions for shortcuts today, and instead you went and found someone who broke, someone who tried what you were trying and failed, and you asked them, simply and gently, when should you have stopped but didn't? What life-saving truth might you hear?
That is the question.
That's it for this deep dive. Thanks for listening, and remember, sometimes the most valuable lessons come from the stories nobody wants to tell.
See you next time.